Hello, I am Ayse Belger, Director of the UNC Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute, and I am pleased to welcome you to this special anniversary event celebrating 50 years of excellence in technical assistance. Since its inception, FPG has recognized that every child deserves a safe, healthy, and stimulating childhood. Our work is dedicated to improving the quality of life for young children in every way, from developmental disabilities and early care and education to physical, social, and emotional health and racial, ethnic, linguistic, cultural, and socioeconomic diversity. Our research and evaluation, implementation, technical assistance, and outreach have all shaped and continue to shape how the nation cares for and educates children. Beginning with the groundbreaking work that Pascal Pet Trohannes started in 1971, our institute has a long and rich history of providing technical assistance to support systems and services for young children with disabilities and their families. And that work continues today as our Trohannes technical assistance projects remain instrumental in supporting the development and dissemination of innovations in early childhood technical assistance. Our celebration takes place across 3 75-minute celebratory keynote presentations and panel discussions with remarks from international disability rights activist Judy Heumann, the Institute's own Jenny Kozlowski, Dr. Sina Skelton, and Catherine Neese, the Acting Assistant Secretary for the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services. I'm so excited to be celebrating this incredible milestone and body of work that continues to thrive here at the UNC Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute. And I thank each of you for joining us today. Here's to another 50 years of excellence in providing technical assistance, support systems, and services for young children with disabilities and their families. Thank you.
Has it really been 50 years?
Thank you, ECTA Center. We celebrate your efforts.
We are grateful for you. We celebrate you as you celebrate all of us. Thank you for the work that you continue to do every day. And here's to 50 more years.
Congratulations to the ECTA Center for 50 years of service to OSEP and the field.
Happy anniversary, Frank Porter Graham. Thank you for all you have done and will do in the future.
Welcome. We're so glad you could join us for our celebration of 50 years of excellence in technical assistance. I am Betsy Ayankoya, a member of the leadership team for the Trohannes Projects and the Early Childhood TA Center, ECTA, at the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute with the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I joined FPG in 1992, and I have the pleasure of being your host for this occasion. We call ourselves Trohannes TA Projects in honor of Dr. Pascal Louis Trohannes, affectionately known as Pat. He was our beloved director who led a series of national and state early childhood technical assistance centers and projects from 1971 until his passing in 2007. For 50 years, his projects and those that have followed have been based on the values and guiding principles that he established and that evolved from his leadership. I want to acknowledge all our Trohannes family, the numerous staff and partners who have worked with us over the years, and are joining us in celebrating today. Thank you to our FPG Director, Dr. Ayse Belger, and the FPG community for contributing to our 50th anniversary. As you know, our celebration takes place across 3 75-minute events featuring keynote presentations and panel discussions. We'll sprinkle in some remarks from you who have been our partners throughout the years, and we'll share some photos and remembrances from history. Today, we ask you to join us as we kick off our 50th anniversary celebration with a reflection on the wisdom of the past, with a keynote address from a former Assistant Secretary for the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, followed by a national panel discussing the history and evolution of technical assistance. On October 7, 1 week from today, we will look at what is informing our work in the present, with a keynote followed by a panel discussing current priorities and practices in technical assistance, supporting IDEA, including building systems capacity to implement and sustain high-quality early childhood inclusion. While we have accomplished much over the last 50 years, a great deal remains to be done. Therefore, in our finale on October 14, our celebration will focus on inspiring the field of TA for the future. Our keynote speaker will set the stage for talking about equity-focused technical assistance, followed by our panel discussing future priorities and the role of TA in helping to engage administrators and policymakers in creating equitable practices, policies, and systems. We are delighted that you have joined us in celebrating this incredible milestone and body of work that continues to thrive here at FPG. And I am honored to introduce our speaker and panel for today. Judy Heumann is a lifelong civil rights advocate for people with disabilities and is recognized internationally as a leader in the disability community. She served as the Assistant Secretary for the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, OSERS, under President Clinton from 1993 to 2001. Her work has produced significant contributions since the 70s to the development of human rights legislation and policies that benefit children and adults with disabilities. She's the author of Being Human, an unrepentant memoir of a disability rights activist, and is featured in the documentary Crip Camp, A Disability Revolution. She has a podcast called The Human Perspective, where she features conversations with change makers and allies committed to fighting harder for all people. Participating in our panel today are Julia Martin Eile, an education program specialist with the Office of Special Education Programs, OSEP, within OSERS at the U.S. Department of Education. She is the Federal Project Officer for the ECTA Center and works on early childhood special education policy issues in the Research to Practice Division. Glenn Gabbard is an Associate Director for Administrative Services and Development at Family Voices. Glenn worked with our TA Center for a number of years as staff with the Federation for Children with Special Needs, providing information, support, and assistance to parents of children with disabilities. Our TA history has always included staff from OSEP-funded parent centers who bring their expertise, their wisdom, and incredible lived experience as family members to influence the development and the provision of our TA to the field. Christina Kasprzak is the Director of Trahanis Technical Assistance Projects at FPG. She currently serves as our co-director along with Megan Venn and is the principal investigator on the FPG subcontract for the Center for Early Childhood IDEA Data Systems, also referred to as DAISY. Now, Christina joined FPG in 1997 and served previously as the director of our TA evaluation unit prior to assuming the role of director of ECTA. She was instrumental in the development of systems framework for building and sustaining high quality early intervention and preschool special education programs. And our moderator for today is Sharon Walsh. Sharon works with the ECTA Center and DAISY. She is also the governmental relations consultant for the Division for Early Childhood of the Council for Exceptional Children and the IDA Infant and Toddler Coordinators Association. Sharon has worked with our TA projects here at FPG since the mid-'80s, when she was staff at the National Association for State Directors of Special Education, and has always been our go-to person on IDEA, what's happening in Washington, D.C., and related early childhood policy and legislation. Now, let's listen into our keynote, where Sharon Walsh recently interviewed Judy Heumann about her personal and her professional experience and what the world was like in the past. And then Sharon will lead the panel in sharing their perspectives on this significant point in our history.
Good afternoon, Judy. Thank you so much for joining us today as we begin our celebration of the long history of Frank Porter Graham in supporting early childhood development and work with children and families. Given your amazing experiences and the work you do, we exactly have the right person. There's nobody better to help start us off. So thank you for being with us. I'd like to start by asking you, if you would, some of us that are joining, some of the folks joining us today may not know the history of disability rights, about all the supporters, all the efforts, all the advocacy that brought us where we are. Would you mind starting off by telling us about what it was like from your earliest memories, what it was like when you were a child, what it was like for families, for adults with disabilities, and then through your lens of experiences, would you bring us a little bit forward from that?
Sure. Thank you, first of all, very much, Sharon, for inviting me to speak. I was really touched by the invitation. Let me also say that when we talk about history, one thing that's very important is that no one person knows all of the history. And so I think one thing that's very important for those people that are listening to this program is begin to think not only about your personal history, but also who are some of the makers for change in your communities, who you maybe don't know, may no longer be living, but you've heard their name mentioned. It's really important, I think, to really delve down deeply about what's happened. And I'm 73 years old, so I'm sure I'm one of the older people participating in this event. And I had polio in 1949. And in 1949, my parents didn't know anything about disability, which for those of you who are parents, I'm sure you may know a little bit more today because there's so much more going on in the area of disability, but you really, most likely really don't have the experience of having a family member who's had a disability or a child, a friend who's got a child with a disability. So you're kind of learning many things as you go along. And I think that was very true for my parents. In addition to the fact that there was no IDEA, there was no ADA, there was no 504, there really wasn't anything. And I had polio during an epidemic like what's going on with COVID. And my mother was pregnant with my brother. I had polio in August and she had my brother in September. So it was quite a tumultuous time. And there was a doctor that recommended that my parents put me in an institution, which they chose not to do. So when I was 5, my mom took me to school. It was in walking distance from our house. And I'm sure she expected nothing except that they teach me. But the school had steps. My mother pulled my wheelchair up the steps, and the principal informed my mother that I couldn't go to that school. For that matter, I couldn't go to any school. And they sent a teacher from the Board of Education in New York City to my house. Principal said, don't worry, they'll send a teacher, and they did for 2.5 hours a week. So I think many of you, both family members and providers, may remember the days, or at least know more about stories of the days where children were just outright refused. And what my parents were really learning was that they needed to become advocates for me. And they did. They didn't know other families who had kids with disabilities. And after I was denied the right to go to school, my mother then was trying to figure out what to do. And when I was in the middle of the fourth grade, having had 2.5 hours a week of instruction for the first, second, third, and half of the fourth grade, the Board of Ed in New York called my mom. I was on a waiting list, and my mother brought me down to the school that I was going to be evaluated. And she had to drive me to and from school for the 1 week evaluation. I was evaluated by a PT and an OT and a speech therapist and a social worker and a doctor. And they could determine whether or not you got to go into the program. So I was accepted in the program. I was the first child who had polio to be accepted into the program. But I think one of the very important parts of what was going on during that period was I began to meet other disabled children, children with cerebral palsy and spina bifida and other forms of disabilities. And the other important aspect of this is so is my mother. My mother and my father were meeting other parents, and they were able to talk to other parents about what the parents saw as barriers and what the parents' vision of what they wanted to have happen. I think that's really an important part of anything that we discuss, that much of the work which has been driven in this area has really been driven by parents and organizations that parents have helped set up over the years. And as parents' vision for their children has changed, and where parents see the value of their children being integrated in society, I think that's also been one of the critical components of allowing more legislation to be developed, to be implemented, and at the state and local levels also to be more demanding that the services being given really will benefit children throughout the course of their life. And when looking at early childhood, I think what we've seen are many things. One is clearly knowing that early intervention, regardless of the significance of the child's disability, is critically important. It's not only critically important for the child, but again, I think it's critically important for the family, because the family, you know, whether you have a child with a disability or not, it's really your responsibility to help instill within your child a future. And when the kid is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, we are really implanting visions of whether or not we see a child with a disability as one who's going to be able to take their rightful place in society.
Judy, it's such a remarkable history, and listening to you talk to us about it, I'm struck with when you were approved by the Senate to become the Assistant Secretary of OSERS in the early 90s. And the exciting part, and I do remember you at that time you chaired the Federal Interagency Coordinating Council. So in listening to you speak just now, I was thinking of the relationship between the families, adults with disabilities, the providers, the state and local agencies. Talk a little bit about the role you played in your leadership when you were in Washington in that position, and how that helped further the efforts. Because you're right, it was early 90s before it was a guarantee down to birth.
Right. So when I was the Assistant Secretary in the Clinton administration from 1993 to 2001, the coordinating council that you're talking about was, we met, I think, a couple of times a year. Mm-hmm. And it was made up of government agencies as well as organizations that had an important role to play in the area of education for disabled early childhood, and including talking with Head Start and many other programs. What I thought was really valuable about it was that it brought these voices together. It allowed us to get data on what was happening and what wasn't happening, and to really look at ways that we could strengthen both the delivery from the federal to the state and local levels, also hear the voices of parents and what was working and not working. And I think, one of the valuable parts about early childhood education is this very clear intent that there are multiple agencies that need to be involved, that coordinated services is critical.
I totally agree. And you heard from families at those council meetings. And then, as you said, you went back to OSERS, and under your leadership, a lot of mechanisms, for instance, technical assistance, were available as states were developing these high quality programs for children and families. But you're right, some of that was cross collaboration with programs in health and human services.
I'm a very strong believer in technical assistance. I think it's one area that makes the United States unique. When I travel around the world, as I did when I worked for the World Bank and for the State Department, one thing that was noticeably absent in many countries was meaningful technical assistance. Ultimately, I believe that there are many people who want to do the right thing, they just don't know what to do. And they may not have learned about it in their training, and therefore their ability to really work as effectively as possible is hampered. So I really looked to the Early Childhood TA Center as one of the technical assistance programs that the Department of Education provides in the area of education as a critical tool to help ensure that people are getting the information they need to be able to provide comprehensive services. And I think one of the other very important parts about the TA Center is that it very much values the role of parents. And to me, the ultimate objective here is not only services for children, but also the empowerment of parents.
We know we've accomplished so much through leaders like yourself and the colleagues you work with. I thought the other day there was an anniversary or a birthday celebration for Justin Dart. So there's no end to the heroes and the history of where the disability efforts are going. But we have a lot of work to still do, Judy. I know you'd be the first person to tell me that. And we know that states and communities are working hard to address any gaps in services to children and families. COVID has certainly exacerbated and put up kind of a bright light for us on the gaps we might have. Can you talk a little bit about your priorities or your current efforts that can help us make sure we have more equitable opportunities going forward?
So now I'm just an ordinary person. I don't work in government, so I don't have the influence over legislation, regulations, et cetera, like I did when I was at OSERS, at the Department of Education. But for me, one of the areas that I do a lot of work on is really communicating with a broad variety of people in the business community, in the nonprofit community, civil society more broadly, disabled and non-disabled people, because one, there are many, many barriers that still exist where disabled people still are not seen as equivalent members of society. And the adverse effect that poverty and race all too frequently play in this discussion. And so I believe that, really what's important about this 50th anniversary is that we know what's possible. Mm-hmm. And we also know when there are barriers put up that really do not allow what is possible to happen. COVID obviously is something that has affected everyone. And so we're all scurrying as we're trying to catch up. And certainly for children with disabilities and their families, this can be even more challenging. And we understand that. And so I think it's more important to be vigilant to ensure that families are not left out to dry. they've got too much on their plate. And so we really have to commit ourselves to ensuring that disabled children are getting the same supports, and some cases more, in order for them to try to catch up. Because we know that we fought for early childhood, because we know that when these services are not provided, there can be significant delays. And it's not just delays for disabled children, but certainly it is significantly for some disabled children.
So true. And we know what we know the challenges, we know the difficulties, and we know things are not happening the way they should everywhere. I guess we keep ourselves focused on that absolute given that we want, which is inclusive, equitable opportunities for all young children with disabilities and their families. Well, for all young children, particularly children with disabilities and their families. Judy, this is so helpful, and we appreciate you joining us so much. I'm wondering, as we're closing, is there anything else that you want to share with us? Any advice to give us, or anything else you want to share to help us with our celebration?
I think there's a lot to celebrate. We've really come so far since I was a kid, but we have so much more to go. So I think what's important is we celebrate our successes. We're honest about where we are, and we fight more vigilant than ever to really get to the end, where we can feel assured that families, regardless of their first language or their economic status, or whether they live in an urban or rural area, are going to be able to get the types of assessments for their children. That we are really working in a system where people believe that inclusivity is something which is essential. And only in the rarest of situations are we looking at children not being included. And we need to be able to ensure that teachers are getting the training that they need to work in diverse classes. And ultimately, in another 5 years, the 55th anniversary, we'll be able to see that we've come through COVID, that children, in fact, have received the services they need, and that we are looking at this next generation really being able to benefit more significantly from education with better employment outcomes.
Judy, on behalf of all of us, I'd like to accept that challenge from you. And I know we can continue to do that. And let's hope 5 years from now, we can have this conversation again and celebrate some more achievements. We really appreciate you being here today so much, and best wishes. And we follow all of your wonderful adventures and all of the things you continue to contribute to our field. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you so much.
Greetings to you all as we celebrate this 50th anniversary of the Frank Porter Graham Technical Assistance work. I have to start us off by saying that for me, it was such an honor to interview Judy Heumann. And even in listening to her again today, her amazing stories for us, her lessons that she shared with us, I kept remembering attending all those interagency federal meetings when Judy chaired, and we listened. She led discussions, as she told us, on the challenges we were facing, the plans and activities were put in place to address those challenges. And even then, now 30 years ago, we were already using and planting those seeds of family, the importance of families in all that policy work, and the importance of interagency collaboration. I just struck with so many memories, and I know you all are too. I'm wondering, what are you all thinking right now? So maybe as we start this panel discussion, you could tell us if there's anything in particular that came to your mind as you were listening to Judy today. Glenn, would you start us off on that?
Oh, of course, Sharon, thanks. It's so great to hear Judy reflect on how closely technical assistance related to IDEA's implementation was connected to the role that families played, and families and parents, especially in those early days. I remember going to my first federal ICC meeting and being so struck with how many people were in the room, and how powerful it was to focus, that they were focused on the lives of children, especially babies. So it's just so moving. I remember the first meeting I went to. You know, federal legislation supporting a free and appropriate public education for children was such a milestone in 1975. And then when the original law was expanded in 87 to include young children and their families, it was so timely for my own family. We just arrived in Massachusetts around that time. We just moved from American Samoa, where our first child was born. And we were so grateful to benefit from EI services and supports that we received at that time. And then, you know, when IDEA was renewed, it became IDEA in 1990, it was just important because it reinforced our own family's aspirations and vision and goals. When Judy started to work at OSERS in 1993, our daughter Megan was 9 years old. And by then, Megan had already grown used to being fully included in community life. She did everything all other kids did. She was painting and developing her religious practice, tormenting her younger brother, writing poetry, and tooling around her elementary school in her power wheelchair. And, you know, it became so clear to us as we watched Megan grow that it was not easy for her, that she was becoming a pioneer for many children and other families that were to follow. So it was great just a few months later when she met Judy in person, because we were starting to try and introduce her to adults with disabilities. And Judy was such a great leader and a powerful role model for Megan. She continued on as a mentor to Megan throughout Megan's life. And for all of us, I think for our family, is such a powerful symbol of change and what's possible for people with disabilities and their families.
Thank you, Glenn. That just added such a lovely picture to the story that Judy started for us. Julia, can I ask you to also reflect a little?
Of course, and thank you for including me today. It's exciting to be here to celebrate. Listening to Judy talk about her career at the Department of Education, I reflect, of course, on my own career. I started working in the early intervention and preschool programs that served blind and visual impairments in New York City in the early 1990s. I got my advanced degree at Teachers College with an OSEP grant. At that time, I didn't know how important OSEP would be to me in my future. And I came to work at OSEP in 2001. I came into the monitoring division with a large group of people. And I quickly learned that Judy, who was still the assistant secretary of OSERS, had worked really hard to get a number of staff in before she left. And she was really driven to increase the staff at our monitoring and also in our research to practice division. And she was really interested in finding content specialists in the field to come work. And so we were the largest group that came in, and it felt special that I was a part of that. It felt special that I was part of that early childhood specialist. And I was excited to I had 2 weeks with her before she left at the end of the Clinton administration, but she made a great impression on me. I continued to follow her work. And just recently we had a little OSEP party in COVID over Netflix, watching Crip Camp together and recognizing all that she had done for not only us in our offices, but for children with disabilities. And so it's really full circle for me to listen to her video today and think about all that has happened. I resonate with a couple of comments that she made also around early intervention and early childhood services. You know, OSEP recognizes that critical need as well, and we do that through our formula and our discretionary grants funding. I resonated with TA, you know, Judy's strong belief in TA, and as the TA&D lead in OSEP and the project officer since I think 2007 with ECTA at FPG, I recognize the importance of technical assistance, as well as I work really hard to make sure we support and fund early childhood TA centers that can help states build their birth through 5 systems. So thank you, Sharon.
Thanks, Julia. Christina, what struck you when you were listening?
Well, thank you, Sharon. It's certainly wonderful to be part of today's celebration. And I've had the pleasure of working with so many wonderful colleagues, including the 3 of you. I was really struck by Judy's personal and professional experiences, sort of that lived experience that she has. In her lifetime, we've seen tremendous change in the rights of and expectations for children with disabilities. I was struck by the fact that doctors, upon diagnosis, immediately recommended that her parents put her into an institution. And then she shared that later schools refused to allow her to attend. And for me, it's almost hard to believe that that was the norm not so long ago. It was truly because of activists like Judy and so many others that we've been able to make as much progress as we have made. I really appreciated Judy's comments about the important role of TA, how unique that is in the US, that we're supporting programs in what she described as doing the right thing. I see TA as a critical tool, as she said, to help ensure that professionals and families are getting the information and supports and services that they need. And I also was just delighted that she recognized that our early childhood TA projects have always valued the role of parents. Betsy said that at the beginning as well. And over the many years and many projects we've had at FPG, we've not only promoted family engagement through our TA, but we have also had parents and parent organizations as key partners. And for example, that's how I first met Glenn back in the NECTAS days when the Federation was a key partner. The Pacer Center has been a long time valued partner with us as well. And right now we are fortunate to partner with the Regional Parent Center Network. And specifically, we have Parent to Parent of Georgia as a key partner on ECTA. So lots of things Judy said resonated, but those were a few things in particular that struck me.
Thanks, all of you. That was kind of I think a really great start to our discussion this afternoon. You know, I'm struck with the fact that all four of us entered technical assistance work at different times in the history that we're talking about today. We all bring different perspectives, all different experiences. I suspect that's probably why all four of us were invited today, and aren't we pleased we were? For me, I was fortunate to be part of the work early at some of the early Frank Porter Graham TA centers, and could not have been more fortunate to have learned so much under our fearless leader, Pat Trohannis. We were charged with literally assisting states by OSEP, of course, who funded it, to establish mandates for children. Just think about this now, if you were not around at that point in your work. At that point in time, when 99-457 was first enacted, only half of the states mandated IDEA services before kindergarten. Right. So that really is pretty incredible. And when you think about where we are today, with every state offering services for children and their families starting at birth, we've really come a long way. So I feel like technical assistance has been such a part of that. And I have a specific question I think I'd like to ask each of you in particular, based upon the roles that you've been playing. Julia, let's start with you, if that's all right with you. What has been and continues to be OSEP's role? Could you talk to us a little more about historically how that role supported states, because they were implementing these incredible systems change efforts, finding evidence-based practices, and OSEP was such a big part of that. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Sharon. You know, when you asked me the role of OSEP, and I think of it in sort of three areas to sort of simplify it. It's through the law, the IDEA law, that we provide support. It's through funding, and it's through technical assistance. And so OSEP's mission is to lead the nation's efforts to improve outcomes for children with disabilities, birth through 21, and their families by ensuring access to fair, equitable, and high-quality education and services. And our vision is for a world in which individuals with disabilities have unlimited opportunities to learn and to lead purposeful and fulfilling lives. Now, that mission is a lofty one. We work hard for it. It didn't start in 1975 as a mission because in 1975 we had the Education for All handicap. And so I think that mission has come to a clearer place over the years of the reauthorizations. We look at the law improving programming for kids. So we collected data, and we saw by 1980, 4 million students aged 3 through 21 were being served. By 1986, we realized, birth through 3, and those children needed those services, as Sharon mentioned. We recognized that the language in the Education Handicap Act wasn't appropriate, and we really wanted to change the name, and that happened in 1990 to IDEA. And then there was reauthorizations to improve access to the general curriculum, and again in 2004, where we looked at greater early intervention services, accountability, improving outcomes, and raising standards for those who teach. And so we can look now at 2020, and the data shows that we're serving 7.5 million children, infants, toddlers, children, youth with disabilities, birth through 21. And so the law has really helped shape a lot of our role, but then funding is also a very important piece of all of that. And for those of you who are not aware of how we fund, we have 2 different areas of funding. We do formula grants, which are grants that go to states for Part C for early intervention, and Part B, K through kindergarten through 21, but also preschool. And we funded in 2020 $477 million to serve over 437,000 infants and toddlers, which is about 3% of the population, 3.7. And we funded preschool at $395 million, which served about 716,000 children. These formula grants are issued every year to states, and they issue those money out to help run the programs. The second piece of it is our discretionary grants programs, and we do it under different line items, national activities that we find are important to the field. We fund our technical assistance dissemination projects. We fund over 30 TA&D projects, birth through 21, for over 43 million per year. We also fund through our personnel development program, where we're educating master's and doctoral level students looking to improve their work in special education through personal prep and professional development. We fund technology grants. And so our technology is looking at providing accessible education materials and supporting captioning and description that is appropriate for use in the classroom. We also fund state personnel development grants, and those are for SEAs, the state education agency level, where they're trying to improve their systems. And as you heard Glenn mention and Sharon mention, we fund parent training and information centers, which are really important and have been funded since 1977. And in early childhood, we've really tried to focus that the parent training and information centers can also support our youngest families and our youngest children. We also fund data. We find data is very important for program improvement, and we encourage states to talk about how they use their data. So we fund an early childhood data center and other data centers. And then finally, we fund model demos, because we know and recognize the importance of bridging the gap between existing research and practices. And so, for example, our 2020 model demos are looking at coaching models, which we find is very important in implementing evidence-based practices. So I talked about the law, I talked about our funding, there's a lot there, and then we fund TA, and OSEP's role has really been to support states and technical assistance by meeting them where they are. OSEP's had has had to look at where states were along this continuum of the law. Where Sharon says there was, there was very few states that were serving early intervention services before 1975. So some states needed different types of technical assistance from us. And early on in birth through 5, TA is critical to help states to set up their early childhood systems. We then later provided TA to monitor and begin to improve the systems. And so what's really amazing is the history of the funding for FPG. I mean, we have been funding some form of early childhood technical assistance since the early 70s, well before any IDA law or EHA law. And that's Pat Trohannis and many other folks at FPG working on models of services. And in the 80s, we funded them to improve TA. In the 90s, we began looking at interagency systems. We funded our early childhood outcomes center that FPG supported on looking at children's outcomes from getting services and their families also. And really for the past 15 years, we have focused on building state systems, interagency agreements, recognizing the social emotional needs and development of young children, disproportionate discipline practices, and better support for inclusion for children with disabilities. We are really proud of our early childhood suite of centers that we fund. They are intentionally funded at over $20 million a year. We have our ECTA Center. We have our National Center on Pyramid Model Innovations. We also have our Early Childhood Personnel Center that looks at building CSPD systems in states. We have our New Technology Center, STEMI, which is also an FPG center, and that looks at supporting practices in STEM with children with disabilities. And as I mentioned earlier, we fund a data center that builds data systems in states to help them work on program improvement. So that's what OSEP's role. It's a big, complex, complicated role that I tried to simplify and say a lot in 5 minutes. So
thank you, Julia. You really did. And clearly the federal office has always been and certainly remains an essential partner in this work that we're doing. Couldn't do it without them. Glenn, I'm going to ask you, turn to Glenn for a minute. Would you trace a little bit of the history of the parent leadership movement, parent engagement and family leadership? Tell us a little bit about that history, and does it have any linkages to this TA history we're talking about?
Sure. It's always interesting to think about what brings family leaders into more formal roles within organizations that serve other families. I mean, my training is as a college administrator. That's what I was doing when we moved to Massachusetts. But, in the early 90s, and as our family matured, I really was taken by the possibilities of a federal policy that looked to family experiences as its mainstay. So Part C was such a cool thing to do. And I was ready to take a break from what I was doing. So I actually joined the staff of the Federation for Children with Special Needs in Boston, one of the first parent-led organizations advocating for kids and families and education, which became one of the first funded parent training information centers. The organization was led by Martha Ziegler, who's one of the foremothers of the social movement for equity and change in education for people with disabilities and their families. And, I just want to give a shout out to that generation of women who really created something so powerful. I mean, I get goosebumps when I think about that accomplishment and how much they contributed to the world. People like, Martha Gentile in Washington State, Judith Raskin, who is in New Hampshire, Paula Hawkins in North Carolina, Florine Poyadu in California. I hope these names are bringing some memories back. Paula Goldberg in Minnesota. They were all inspirations, and they formed this network that became an advocacy group that eventually, in collaboration with professionals, of course, resulted in the EHA in the mid-70s, and then turned into this advocacy for parent training, this network of parent training information centers, which still, as Julia pointed out, still exists today and has gotten more expansive and more, digging deeper into its mission to serve families of younger children. The role of these PTIs has always been to embrace new leaders, new families who are experiencing what it means to have a child with a disability, and then embrace them and explain to them what the possibilities are, and eventually help them think through their own role in terms of leadership. So that kind of formalization of the parent movement as it happened in the 80s and 90s was on somewhat of a parallel track, where other visionary leaders like Pat Trahanis were also looking at building TA networks that were developing and emerging at that time. And, Pat had the vision to create this network of TA that helped to partner with these parent training information centers. So it was through that collaborative work in the late 80s and then into the 90s that brought what was then called NECTAS, the New England the National Early Childhood Technical Assistance System, was formed and brought on these partners, these family leaders who represented these parent training information centers to collaborate on providing and welcoming family leaders from across the country into this system of technical assistance. So I had the privilege of joining my colleagues Evelyn Hauslein and Ruth Ann Rasbold to support families of young children and to take a leadership policy at the policy table, both in Washington and across the country in different communities where families were living. We had the opportunity to learn from these families who were serving on local interagency coordinating councils and who are also developing their own training efforts in their own communities to train families as well. So there's this lovely kind of growth and expansion of the power of family experiences and advocacy and making change for families who come in the future. Such a gift to have this role in that process, I have to say. And now I'm actually working with another group that Family Voices, which is continuing that advocacy work on the health side of things, and seeing this Family Voices in relation to other family organizations on the national level, Parent to Parent, the National Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. The list goes on, and it's just a powerful testimony to the contributions of people like Martha and her peers, and seeing it extended throughout these other TA networks as ECTA is continuing to do now. So it's such a great thing to watch and to know that it will continue to expand.
Glenn, you know that we are struck, Julia and Christina and I, in listening to you, that the family champions that you described that kind of got us where we are today certainly includes you. And we thank you for being part of that work, that champion work that brought us here. But even more, though, when you think about it, think of all the family champions right now across the country in every community that are moving the work forward. And I personally look forward to enjoy watching that every day and really look forward to kind of where we'll be when we start moving, when we continue to move forward. But thank you, Glenn, for that walk through some champions there that really helped us. Christina, certainly last but not least, as our current director of the Early Childhood TA Center, can you share some with us about the role of TA at Frank Porter Graham during this time that we've been working to support services for children and families?
Yeah, I'd love to, Sharon. And it's so interesting to think of how our TA has paralleled the things that Julia talked about at the federal level and Glenn with the parent centers. Back in 1971, our earliest TA projects were really focused on being supporting model demonstration projects. So we were helping them design and implement and evaluate these models for serving children with disabilities and their families. And then for more than a decade, we actually supported those projects to replicate those effective models in other locations and through in-service training. So the earliest work was really with those demo projects. But as Julia described the changes over time, our TA certainly changed over time based on the federal priorities and, of course, the needs and status of the field. In the 80s, our TA, that's when our TA really began to focus on supporting state systems more, helping states put those federal policies and services into place for children with disabilities. Essentially, I'd say making sure there was access to services. And some of that early TA, it was helping states sort of set up TA systems, state TA systems, create maybe a statewide IFSP, building some interagency partnerships, establishing their state interagency coordinating councils. So lots of things at the sort of foundational level of getting their systems up and running. And then when I joined FPG in 1997, I'd say things were changing again. at that point, the field was really beyond those early stages of setting up systems and moving more towards that monitoring and quality improvement that Julia was mentioning as well. So RTA paralleled that and really helped states put systems in place to monitor and assure accountability, and also really starting to make all those linkages between state infrastructure, local delivery of services, and outcomes for children and families. So connecting all of those and working intensively with states on systems change efforts. So helping them understand the components of a quality system and how that then can help them support local programs and districts in the implementation of effective practices. Julia also mentioned the Early Childhood Outcomes Center. So I think that was around 2003. The ECHO Center was funded, and we were really honored to partner with SRI in that work, which focused on, first we were supporting OSEP a lot, but then also the entire field with defining and then setting up systems for measuring child and family outcomes in early intervention and preschool special education. So that was a really significant point in our history as well. And then I think maybe just flash forward to now, and currently we're really focused on state systems capacity building. So really helping states look at their infrastructure development, areas like sustainable finance systems, still working on effective accountability systems, personnel development, those areas of their systems development using tools like our system framework, and really supporting states in making these systems change efforts. We're also very focused on leadership, individual leadership development for Part C and 619 coordinators. They have very complicated jobs, and we support them. We partner with them to help them with their strategic planning, the whole concept of leading from the middle, using implementation science, building effective teams, lots of areas like that in leadership development. I'd like to say, though, regardless of some of the specific activities that changed maybe from year to year or project to project, RTA is and really always has been geared towards increasing access to and participation in high quality inclusive programs for young children with disabilities. So, you know, throughout our entire history, we've always had this focus on inclusion for children with disabilities. How can we help ensure that they have all the opportunities that other children have, that they're successful in their homes and in their communities and in their schools? And so while we've evolved over the years to meet sort of this ever-changing needs and priorities, I'd also say we've really remained fixed on that goal of equitable opportunities and equitable outcomes for young children with disabilities and their families.
Thank you, Christina. Boy, I'm looking at the clock and I don't like what I see. I wish we had so much more time. It's going so quickly. I know we could go on for much longer. The history, the stories are wonderful, but it just makes me want to move forward and keep making these amazing things we're doing, the places we're going. As we have to close this discussion, I'm wondering if you can each share some final thoughts with us. I'm going to ask you in particular to focus your remarks, if you would, on our work in supporting leaders in their efforts to promote and advance equity. We are moving forward and trying so hard, but probably not hard enough yet, toward achieving the vision we all share to make it a reality, to have equitable opportunities available for all young children and their families. Maybe as we close the panel, you challenge us all or give us our marching orders, give us a charge as we do that. And that would really help. And Glenn, would you start us off with this last piece, please?
Oh, sure. I've really appreciated taking a role in this conversation about the saga of technical assistance and how it's changed and evolved. Really, such as Judy pointed out, really just such an amazing amount of change in such a short amount of time. Really retooling how people think about huge issues where there was such resistance in the past. You know, I think that this past 2 years in particular have been so devastating, certainly both personally for our family and systemically for the country and the world. You know, I think is one of the challenges for us is to, and I hear the term, well, let's revert back to the new normal. And I think that we need to be very mindful that of the need for deeper structural change. And that means, I think, looking at reflecting on how to reconceive some of these things that we have taken for granted. What does it mean to do technical assistance in a context in which the economy is, the socioeconomic differences are so significant? And that returning to what we were doing, which is our tendency, I think, for all of us, is not necessarily the best response in this case. We've learned so much. If there is any benefit whatsoever of the pandemic, it's that it's just put in high relief the kinds of inequities that have been with us for so long, including inequities for people who live at the intersection of disability and race and culture and economic disenfranchisement. So, you know, I don't want to be too abstract, but I just think we need to re-examine terms that we take for granted. What does it mean to be included? What does it mean to be equitable? And to be very mindful of challenges around listening to and maybe redefining terms that we thought we understood. I think one of the powerful engines of that re-understanding is by listening to people that we maybe don't understand or have not understood in the past. Or I always tell people to be mindful of who's not at the table. Who are we not hearing from? Who have we forgotten? Because certainly this will be a powerful time when in this recovery period of trying to think about those people in different ways. Understanding that, you know, I was talking with the group the other day about evaluation and thinking about what sorts of evaluative methodologies are available that help us understand Indigenous populations better. So needing to match the form with the function, needing to really think about these changes so that we don't come at them in the same way, because certainly, if anything we've learned in the last 2 years is that the solutions have not been the ones that we wanted to have for many of these communities. So, and you know, I'm confident that folks in this network can rise to that challenge. When you think about the progress that's been made since the 60s in terms of social justice and change, particularly for people with disabilities.
Thanks, Glenn. You challenged us and motivated us too. We have to listen more carefully and keep watching for those who might be left behind and not regress back to what the old normal was, right, Glenn? Mm-hmm. Julia, how about some thoughts from you?
Sure. And I really, you know, resonate with everything Glenn said about not reverting back, really looking forward, being innovative, thinking differently about how we can make services better. You know, our bedrock is the law on equity. You know, IDA Part C and Part B preschool has always been about equitable services for young children with disabilities. And we've talked about how hard we've worked to make that happen. And like Judy said, we've come very far, but we still have a long way to go. I would think the current focus on the word equity is sometimes is not always as helpful to us because it's not clearly defined. It's a large, it's almost too big to put into a definition. And so I know a lot of us in OSEP are thinking about what it means for equitable services and how to define equity, but I think it comes clear to us when we think about what are the inequities for children with disabilities and how to solve them versus the broad word of equity. I think, similar to Glenn, I think a lot about the last 2 years and what COVID highlighted and disparities for children with disabilities, specifically Black and Brown children. I think we recognize state systems have capacity issues, not even related to COVID, or moving to a virtual learning just because of longstanding systemic issues like chronic turnover of leadership and shortage of personnel. And so that means we can't go back to where we were before, right? We have to think differently. And so there's been funding under the American Rescue Plan, $250 million to Part C and $200 million to preschool, which is, we hope, is going to help states move forward. There's the American Families Plan. I know I just got a text that we're not shutting down tomorrow, so yay! I still will be working, and hopefully so will our folks in the Congress to move the American Families Plan forward to look at universal preschool. If universal preschool can pass, we could be the ability of looking at a mixed delivery system for preschool children, but also inclusive childcare programs are all part of that American Families Plan. And so that's what I'm thinking about, and what I'm thinking about with my colleagues in HHS who work on Head Start and childcare. You know, we believe in building the capacity, increasing collaboration between our offices, and better defining equitable services for kids, but staying true to the bedrock of IDA, which is equity. So yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful that we'll see some change moving forward, and I'm hoping everyone else will move forward too and be hopeful. Thanks, Sharon.
We're all smiling because I think we all need to keep that positive vision in our future as we keep marching forward. Christina, what do you think?
Well, certainly the comments that Glenn and Julia made resonate with me as well. I don't think that going back to our old normal is not only where we need to go, but it's also not where I don't even think we can go. There's something new and better ahead of us. And, Julia was talking about how IDEA is all about equity, and I can say the same for RTA. I feel like we've always supported states in creating equitable access and opportunities for children with disabilities. In our history, we've done lots of things like helping states design systems and materials to engage diverse or underserved families. We've provided TA in developing policies to address disproportionate discipline and issues of suspension and expulsion. Help states examine work to address disparities. But I think what I'm really excited about as far as our current emphasis, and I guess my challenge to all of us is, can we be explicit in focusing on racial disparities, that intersection of race and disability, to ensure that children and families of color are able to access, participate in, and have the full benefits of early intervention and preschool special education. I think it's a place where we have a long history of being leaders in the work in social justice, and this is a place for us to be leaders again. And Sharon, if you don't mind, there's one quote from Judy's comments that I just loved so much, and I thought maybe I would sort of end with that, sort of paraphrase, I think, what she said. She said, it's important that we celebrate our successes, be honest where we are right now. And I think she said, fight more than ever to assure that all families, regardless of race and language and economic status, can access services and achieve the outcomes they deserve. So I think her charge is also my charge. I hope we can do that together.
Such a powerful way to end our panel today, Christina. Thank you. Right where we started, with Judy giving us her charge at the end of her remarks. Thank you all so much for everything you contributed to the celebration this afternoon. It's so clear we have lots of important work ahead of us, but we know it will take all of us, families and communities, policymakers, providers, researchers, those who provide professional development in our field, and of course, technical assistance providers. Congratulations to Frank Porter Graham on this wonderful 50th anniversary. Before I hand the program back to Betsy, though, I have the pleasure of leaving you with a very special message, and actually a toast from someone who is near and dear to many of our hearts, a very special member of our community and very important to our history. He led much of our success and dedicated his career to supporting high quality services for young children and their families. Thank you all.
Greetings from Falls Church, Virginia. I'm Jim Hamilton, and I was chief of the early childhood branch in OSEP around the time that 99-457 was enacted. I'm here to share my thank you and congratulations to the ECTA Center for 50 years of service to OSEP and the field. During its many years of operation, the TA Center faced and met many challenges, but no challenge, in my opinion, was as great as helping the states establish or expand services to young children and their families immediately after 99-457 was passed. You can probably guess that I had more than a few sleepless nights during that period. But rest would finally come when I thought of the TA team in Chapel Hill and how hard you were working to help dreams come true for thousands of families and professionals. Thank you especially for bringing the early childhood community together and keeping it together. So I trust that you will join me in raising a glass to toast the TA Center on its golden anniversary of service to OSEP and to the field. And of course, I hope you all are around to celebrate your centennial anniversary, and I'm there to celebrate it with you. If by chance I'm not there in person, be assured I'll be with you in spirit.
Oh, so nice to hear from Jim Hamilton. Thank you so much. He was always such a great cheerleader for us in our work. That really brought back memories, as did everything I heard today. What a great history lesson. Thank you to Judy Heumann for that retrospective look back and helping us just visualize where we were all those many years ago. And thank you to our panelists, to Sharon and Glenn and Julia and Christina, and helping us to reflect back, but also inspiring us for where we are now. It's really, really exciting. We want to invite all of you to come back here 1 week from today for part 2 of our celebration. You're going to hear from one of ECTA's own, Danny Kozlowski. We're going to talk about inclusion. We're going to talk about our priorities for where we are right now. But before we do that, we want to end with some recorded remembrances. So stay on and listen to that. And then we'll see you back here, same time, same place, next week. Goodbye and enjoy the rest of your day.
And it didn't matter if they were NECTAC or NECTAS or ECTA. The folks at Frank Porter Graham have been our go-to early childhood intervention resource all along. So I was a brand new Part H data manager, and NECTAS was the lead for that at the time. And then OSEP put out a grant where I think they were trying to combine the Part B data managers and the Part C data managers under one TA center. And Frank Porter Graham didn't get it. And we were kind of upset because we felt like the early childhood part was going to get lost in the bigger B. And then we discovered that ECTA was just not going to stop. They were going to support us all along. And to me, that was a really important sign because I knew I could totally trust this organization to have my back.
The NECTAS technical assistance mode has been and remains excellent, worthy of the high regard others in the educational TA field and federal agencies have for it. The program's approach to technical assistance has been carefully refined over the years, and its service delivery has clearly become even more effective with that refinement. 1997 evaluation of NECTAS by a panel of external experts.
I'm a very strong believer in technical assistance. I think it's one area that makes the United States unique. When I travel around the world, as I did when I worked for the World Bank and for the State Department, one thing that was noticeably absent in many countries was meaningful technical assistance.
The knowledge, skills, and abilities of the experienced NECTAS staff are unparalleled in our experience in working with various national technical assistance providers. State Education Agency staff.
As a Part C coordinator, I have been afforded the privilege of receiving exceptional guidance. Betsy Ayankoya has been instrumental in cultivating my knowledge of the overall educational system. ECTA's tools, resources, and advice continue to help me stay abreast of best practices in the field and to support my staff as well as EI providers. It is through ECTA that I have gained knowledge, skills, and abilities that lend to strengthening systems and supporting families. Also, it is through Ms. Ayankoya's coaching and consistent mentoring that we have built a strong program, and we look forward to continuing improving in the future. Thank you, ECTA Center. We celebrate your efforts.